calves, when they're born, they have no antibodies in their bloodstream at all. They have never really been exposed to any pathogens or any bugs, so they're completely naive to the world. And what cows do to help protect their calves in that early lifetime is they produce colostrum, and colostrum is full of antibodies, which are the antibodies to bugs that the cow herself has been exposed to. And what you want is for the calf to get that feed of colostrum as early as possible.
Hello and welcome to The Beef Edge, the Teagasc beef podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and this week is the second episode in a two-part podcast. I'm joined by Teagasc researcher and vet John Donlon to get an insight into top tips relating to caring for the newborn calf. Don't forget to listen back to last week's episode on top tips relating to managing the cow before calving and calving the suckler cow. John, you're very welcome back. What's the best advice for when the calf is born?
So I suppose once you have the calf on the ground, the first thing that I'll often do if I'm calving a cow is, once we'll say we have the calf maybe up and we're happy that we've gotten all of the fluid out of the lungs, I always try and sit the calf up so that it's sitting upright rather than lying out on its side. Calves, lungs they're because they've been inside the womb, they're only after taking their first few breaths. So what you want to do is give them the best opportunity to be able to breathe as properly as possible. So that's often if they're sitting kind of upright rather than lying out on their sides. And then once you have that, you want to get your bit of water into the ear, or a little, bit of straw or a finger up the nose or something to try and get them to cough and expel the rest of that fluid. A good happy calf that's had an easy calving will nearly do most of this stuff naturally itself. It's the maybe calves from the harder calvings that you'll have to keep a very close eye on and make sure that they are kind of start sitting up for you and eventually get up. And I suppose the reason that you want to keep a close eye on that is because the most vital part of an early calf's life is, or a calf's early life is colostrum management. So calves, when they're born, they have no antibodies in their bloodstream at all. They have never really been exposed to any pathogens or any bugs. So they're completely naive to the world. And what cows do to help protect their calves in that early lifetime is they produce colostrum. And colostrum is full of antibodies, which are the antibodies to bugs that the cow herself has been exposed to. And what you want is for the calf to get that feed of colostrum as early as possible, because the calf's gut is in a very unique kind of stage in that early life where it is able to actually absorb those antibodies into the bloodstream to give the calf immunity. So we call it passive immunity. And if you feed the calf within the first 2 hours of life, that's when that gut is the most open, and that's when you'll get the best transfer. So I suppose that's why I talk about particularly the calves that might have been from hard calvings or that seem a little bit slow. They're the calves in particular that we have to make sure get that in the first 2 hours of life, because they're the ones that are least likely to get up and suck the cow. So I suppose we want for that colostrum as well, you want that to be the first milk from a cow. So, ideally it would be from the calf's mother herself. If you can't get that, colostrum from another cow is the next best thing. In very rare kind of cases, is colostrum replacer a good alternative? In most cases, natural colostrum from a cow on the farm is the best thing for the calf. The replacers are for if you're really, really stuck. And I suppose the most colostrum that you can, the biggest volume you can get for the calf is the best. In dairy calves, they'll often talk about 3 litres, but in suckler cows, we'll say, the cow often produces a much more concentrated version of colostrum, so she probably won't produce a full 3 litres, but it more than likely the colostrum will be of a higher quality, so it'll have much more antibodies in it compared to a dairy cow. So really, as much as you can feed the calf, as much as it'll drink in those first 2 hours is probably the key thing. And then obviously the next thing I would often do is dip the navel. So the navel is the way that the calf was kept alive inside in the uterus. It has several different blood vessels in it and other structures inside in it, and they all lead up into the abdomen. So it's a kind of an open wound that you have on your calves, and we need to take care of it as well as possible, because in my own experience anyway, navels from going to farms across the country doing research and just doing veterinary work, navel ill is one of the things that often maybe gets missed, and it can kind of grumble on. So good disinfection of the navel is key as well, and doing that straight away once the calf is on the ground is very important as well. So I would often prefer dipping the navel, and there's numerous different products out there that you can use, iodine products and chlorhexidine products, and to be honest with you, there isn't a whole lot of definitive evidence for either in terms of which works better. So it's whatever you want to use yourself, but definitely getting that navel disinfected early on is going to be very important.
Some great advice there, John. You mentioned there, most cases we expect the calf will get up and suck the cow straight away or can take a feed from a bottle. But what are the key tips when it will come to a stomach tube in a calf?
So I suppose the stomach tube is a very useful tool, but it's also, quite an intimidating thing, especially if you're new to farming or you don't do it very often. The first thing, the tube itself, make sure that it's clean. So wash it out between every feeding with lots of water so that there's no remnants of the previous colostrum feed in it. Because what can happen is if the tube is dirty or it has leftover colostrum sitting in it, that can grow bacteria. And if you put in your feed, sometimes the bacteria that grow inside in the tube can actually mean that the calf isn't able to absorb as much of the nutrients and antibodies because it's contaminated with bacteria. So making sure your tube is clean. I personally like the slightly softer tubes that are easier to kind of manipulate. There's numerous different types out there. It'll be personal preference which ones you use, but the key thing to do with the tube is when you're passing it, be nice and gentle. This isn't a particularly nice experience for the calf. They're going to struggle. So, trying to do it as gently as possible so that you're not traumatizing them is going to be very important. And obviously there's a food tube and a windpipe, and we definitely don't want our stomach tube going down the windpipe, because if we do put it down the windpipe, we can drown the calf. So really nice and gentle when you're putting it into the calf's mouth and passing it, and the gentler you go, the more likely the calf is to swallow it for you. And then once you feel the calf has swallowed it, what I'll often do is just keep a hand on the left-hand side of the animal's neck, and I should be able to feel the tube pass by my hand. If I don't feel the tube pass by my hand, there's a strong possibility that it's gone down the windpipe, and I just take it out and I'll try and repass it again, and then just pass it down and let your feed in. And then once you're done feeding, kink it off again when you're pulling it out, so that if any you don't risk kind of letting a little bit out while you're pulling it out, and maybe the calf might inhale it or something like that. But I suppose the key thing is if you're not confident doing it, probably look to go to someone who is confident doing it, and do it a couple of times with them, because it's very much something you have to learn by doing. It's not something that you can kind of read in the book or something and understand. You really have to feel what it's like, to feel it pass by your hand when it's passing normally, and then understand how to hold the animal when you're doing it. So if you're not confident, try and go to somebody that is doing it more often and just see how they're doing it.
That's great, John. And I suppose regardless whether it's a suckler calf or a dairy beef calf that might be brought onto the farm as part of a dairy beef system, there are a number of ailments that can arise on the farm, particularly in relation to different health perspectives. What do you see as the main causes?
So I suppose the big things would be scour and respiratory disease or pneumonia are the two big ones. And then, as I said kind of before, navel ill is one of those other ones that you'll often see if you go looking for it, but maybe we don't pick it up as often.
And in relation to the calf scour that you mentioned, what are kind of the key actions the farmer can take in a preventative method and then as a treatment method?
So the key thing with scour is colostrum is going to help you protect your calf. So getting on top of your colostrum management is going to be key. But I suppose, where does the calf get the scour from? There's numerous different pathogens that can cause scour, but the main ones that you'd know would be rotavirus and cryptosporidium. They'd be the two big ones that would cause the majority of scour in calves across Ireland. So rotavirus is a virus and cryptosporidium is a parasite, and they're both quite hardy kind of pathogens, so they'll happily live in the environment. Sick calves will shed them out in their dung, and we'll say, if you had an outbreak last year, make sure that you clean out the shed completely, get all of the bedding, all of the dung out of the shed, then a full power wash so that the shed is sparkling clean, and then go out and get a disinfectant, because even after that there's the possibility that there'll be crypto or scour or rota kind of lurking in, we'll say, cracks in the concrete or something like that. So you have to really disinfect the shed fully. So at the beginning of your calving season, a full disinfection of the shed is very important, and I suppose making sure that you get a disinfectant that does kill those things. If you have an outbreak of scour this year, there's lots of there's tests that vets can do, basically calf side nowadays. So it's very good to test the scour and see what pathogen comes up, because it'll give you a good idea of what you need to do to manage it. In terms of treatment, I suppose the big thing is, in most cases, calves with scour don't need antibiotics. So oral antibiotics aren't going to help calves much. The key thing with calves with scour is replacing the fluid and the electrolytes that those calves have lost. So, calves can scour 4 to kind of 8 litres of fluid a day, and they'll be losing electrolytes in that scour as well. They'll be losing sodium and potassium, and they'll also develop an acidosis from that scour. So apart from feeding the calf, you also need to supplement electrolytes and fluids. And so realistically, if a calf is scouring quite severely, it may need 2 to 4 feeds of 2 litres of electrolytes during a day to kind of compensate for the loss of fluids. And the electrolytes, there's lots of electrolytes out there. The key things to look out for in your electrolytes are that they have sodium, potassium, glucose, and bicarbonate, or something that we call a bicarbonate precursor in them, because they're the key kind of things that the calf is losing in the scour. And never restrict feed for these calves. Always try and get them to drink something. at least offer them milk as well, because there is glucose in those electrolytes, but the glucose is actually primarily there so that the calf can absorb the sodium in the electrolytes. There isn't enough there to provide enough energy for the calf to recover properly from the scour. So the most high energy thing you can feed the calf is milk. And, like the idea that milk is too rich for scouring calves or things, we've kind of gone away from that now when we realize that the energy and the nutrients in milk is very important for the calf to kind of rebuild its gut after an episode of scour.
And you mentioned there, John, the respiratory diseases and infections, and this is an area that your research is carried out on. What are kind of the main causes from that side of things, or what preventative measures can farmers put in place?
So there's loads of different viruses and bacteria that can cause respiratory disease in calves. There's ones like BRSV or parainfluenza, and then on the bacteria side you have bacteria like Mannheimia hemolytica and Mycoplasma bovis that can cause pneumonia. So there's loads of different ones, and for that reason I generally try and focus on prevention when I talk to people about preventing or about BRD, because it's very hard to know, or it's very hard to know without testing exactly what you've got on a farm. So the key thing for me is calves need to have a good bed of straw under them, because we'll say if they're particularly cold, or if they're particularly wet, or if they're exposed to quite a strong draft or something like that, that will drain a lot of energy from the calves, because they'll be trying to keep themselves warm, and that'll mean that the calves don't have as much energy to put towards their immune system, so they'll be much more likely to pick up these diseases. So straw is very important at kind of protecting from a lot of those things. There are vaccines out there that you can use, and certainly in high risk calves like dairy beef calves or farms that have a previous history of pneumonia in their calves, vaccines can be very useful. The intranasal vaccines in particular are a great kind of invention in the last couple of years, because you can give a lot of them to calves between like less than a day old to 2 weeks old. You can start giving those vaccines, and they'll kind of start inferring protection onto that calf within the space of a week or 2 weeks. So they're very, very useful, especially in farms where you know that your calves are getting sick quite early with pneumonia. And then I suppose the other thing that has popped up in the research in recent times, which is quite interesting, is things like dust and ammonia in sheds can cause nearly what you'd call an asthma or an inflammatory kind of disease in calves' lungs, and that'll predispose the calves to pneumonia as well. So particularly, we'll say around producing things where you might produce a lot of dust inside in sheds, try and avoid that as much as possible. So, if you have particularly dusty straw or things like that, trying to bed the calves without kind of whipping up loads of dust will be quite important. And especially this year, I suppose we're going to have a bit of a shortage of straw, or straw is going to be quite expensive. So, trying to avoid, we'll say, the straw getting particularly wet or anything like that is going to be important. So, keeping the shed as dry as possible, avoiding leaks from water troughs or kind of rain coming in and soaking bedding will be very important this year as well.
Finally, John, clostridial diseases can cause a number of conditions in cattle, and often it's too late when they're detected. Can you offer some advice for farmers on them?
So I've seen out in practice, I remember seeing a particularly bad case of an outbreak of blackleg, where a farm had elected not to vaccinate the cattle, and they'd actually lost maybe 5 or 6 out of a group of 60 with an outbreak of it. So I suppose the point is there are vaccines available for clostridial diseases, and I would make sure to vaccinate my animals, because clostridial diseases are basically ubiquitous in the environment. There's no farm that doesn't have clostridial pathogens on it. So it's really just a case of you have to vaccinate the animals to make sure that they're protected. There's no way that you can avoid them getting exposed to clostridial pathogens. So there are numerous vaccines on the market there, and I would always choose to go for the vaccines that cover for a number of different clostridial pathogens, because blackleg is the most common one. You'd have other ones like tetanus as well, but depending on the part of the country you're in, there may be other less common clostridial diseases that your animals might be exposed to. And I suppose you'd say vaccinate the calves between kind of 8 and 10 weeks, or maybe a little later, because often calves will get protection from the colostrum from the mother for clostridial disease. So the first kind of 10 weeks of life they're probably protected, but then we need to give them the vaccine and then give them the booster a month later for protection going on from then on.
That's great, John. Thanks very much. Some great key tips and advice there for farmers caring for the newborn calves in the coming weeks.
Thank you very much.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to John for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.